Arthur's family truth. The dentist didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the x-rays, then back at me. These injuries, they don't match. I didn't react. I just sat there. Then he lowered his voice. Can I ask you something? What exactly has your wife been feeding you? I didn't answer right away, because for the first time I wasn't thinking about the x-rays anymore. I was thinking about breakfast that morning. I went home that afternoon and sat at the kitchen table longer than usual. She was already there, cooking. She didn't look at me. She just kept cooking. And for the first time since we got married, I didn't touch the food she made. I thought I was developing dementia. My wife thought so too. Turns out she was counting on it. My name is Arthur Harmon. I'm 58 years old, a retired civil engineer from Seattle, Washington. I spent 30 years on construction sites, survived 2 recessions, and buried the love of my life when Patricia died of ovarian cancer. I thought I had seen the worst life could throw at a man. I was wrong. Let me back up. Patricia and I had 29 years together. Real years, the kind where you know exactly how the other person takes their coffee, where you can finish a sentence they started 3 hours ago. When she died, I didn't think I'd ever want to sit across a dinner table from anyone again. For 4 years, I didn't. The house in Eastlake felt too big and too quiet at the same time. My daughter Allison called every Sunday from Denver, and those calls were the best part of my week. Friends would occasionally push me to get out more, go to this event or that one, meet people. I resisted every time. I wasn't ready, and I didn't see the point in pretending I was. Then a buddy of mine from the engineering firm practically guilt-tripped me into attending a veterans charity dinner downtown. I went just to get him off my back. I planned to stay an hour, shake some hands, and leave. I stayed almost 4 hours because of Sandra Caldwell. She was sitting 2 seats down from me at the dinner table, talking to someone about estate planning. That got my attention first. I was 54, freshly retired, with a lot of thoughts about where my savings were going. She was 49, well put together, confident without being loud. She introduced herself as an independent financial planner, specialized in retirement accounts. We started talking about finances, then about Seattle, then about everything else. She laughed at a bad joke I made about load-bearing walls. She asked real questions and actually listened to the answers. She had this way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. I know how that sounds now. At the time, it felt like a lifeline. We dated for about a year. I took it slow, slower than she wanted, honestly. She was warm, attentive, always seemed to know when I was having a rough day. She never pushed me on the subject of Patricia, but when I brought it up, she listened. When I mentioned that I still kept a photo of Patricia on the bookshelf, Sandra said she'd never ask me to take it down. Allison flew in from Denver to meet her before I proposed. She was polite, asked all the right questions, smiled at all the right moments. But on the last night of her visit, after Sandra had gone to bed, Allison sat across from me in the kitchen and said, "She seems fine, Dad. I just want you to take your time. That's all." I told her I'd been alone for 4 years and I knew what I wanted. She didn't push. She hugged me before she left for the airport and said, "I just want you to be careful. I should have sat with that longer." I didn't. Sandra and I got married about a year after that veterans dinner. She moved into the Eastlake house. I had offered to sell it, start somewhere new with no history attached. She said no, she wanted to honor what I'd built there. We redecorated together, kept a few of Patricia's touches, made the place feel like both of ours. At the time, that felt generous. Looking back, I understand she needed access to the house, the paperwork, the files, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first year and a half of the marriage was genuinely good. Sandra's work kept irregular hours, evening client meetings, weekend seminars in Portland or Spokane, occasional day trips to Bellevue. I didn't think much of it. I'd spent 3 decades in a demanding career. I understood professional obligations. Then, about 18 months in, I started waking up at 3 a.m. for no reason. Not every night at first, just a few times a week, lying there with my mind running and my stomach unsettled. I chalked it up to retirement adjustment. Too much time to think, not enough structure. Then the stomach cramps started. After meals, sometimes between meals, no pattern I could identify. I felt nauseated on and off for weeks. My hands started going numb, not constantly, but in episodes, tingling in my fingers, working up into my forearms. I mentioned it to my doctor, Dr. Lawrence Payton, who had been my physician for 15 years. He ran a full blood panel, checked my vitals, asked about stress and diet. Everything came back clean. "These things happen in our 50s, Arthur," he told me. Reduce stress, cut back on coffee, get more exercise. I followed his advice. The symptoms eased for a while, then came back worse. Around that time, Sandra started making me morning smoothies. She said a client of hers had dealt with similar issues and a specific set of supplements had helped. She ordered them from a wellness company online. The smoothies tasted terrible, chalky and bitter no matter how much fruit she blended in. But she made them every single morning, with genuine-looking concern on her face, and I drank them without question, because that's what you do when someone is taking care of you. That's what I believed she was doing. The memory issues started around month 20 of the marriage. I'd walk into a room and stand there with no idea why I'd come. I'd lose a thought completely mid-sentence, not just forget a word, but lose the whole thread. One afternoon, I couldn't recall the name of a street I'd driven down 1,000 times during my years on a job site nearby. I stood in the kitchen for a full minute trying to pull it up and it just wasn't there. I was terrified. My mother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 74. I started doing the math in my head, wondering if I was tracking toward the same thing just a decade earlier. Sandra brought it up one evening while we were sitting on the back porch, gently, carefully, like she'd been waiting for the right moment. Arthur, have you thought about seeing a neurologist? With your mother's history, it might be worth ruling things out. Her voice was soft. Her expression was worried in exactly the right way. I told her I'd think about it. Allison noticed something was off during one of our Sunday calls. I mentioned the memory gaps and she went quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, that really doesn't sound like you." "Are you sure, doctor?" "Peyton ran everything." I told her he had done a full workup. She asked if I'd gotten a second opinion. I said I hadn't, that Sandra had been coming to appointments with me and keeping notes, asking questions I wouldn't have thought to ask. Allison didn't say much after that, just, "Okay, Dad. Keep me posted." Looking back, that was her being careful. She didn't want to push me away by pushing too hard. The dental appointment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Sandra had been mentioning tooth sensitivity for a few weeks, cold drinks, certain foods. I made her an appointment with Dr. Gloria Mercer, a dentist with a practice near Capitol Hill that a colleague had recommended. Sandra asked if I'd come along. She said she got anxious at dental offices and would feel better if I was in the waiting room. I said, "Of course, that's what you do." The appointment started routine enough. Dr. Mercer examined Sandra's teeth, asked about the sensitivity, and ordered a full set of x-rays. I sat in the waiting room with my phone. 20 minutes passed, then 30. A dental assistant came out and asked if I'd come speak with Dr. Mercer privately. Something in her face made my chest tighten before she said another word. Dr. Mercer met me in the hallway outside the x-ray room. Sandra wasn't with her. "Mr. Harmon, I need to ask you about your wife's injury history," she said, keeping her voice low. "Has Sandra had any significant accidents in the past few years? Falls, impacts, anything that might have caused bone trauma?" I didn't understand the question. "Not that I know of." "Why?" She gestured toward her office and closed the door behind us. She pulled the x-rays up on her monitor and pointed to several areas I wouldn't have known how to read on my own. "These are healed fractures," she said. "This one in the jaw is relatively recent, maybe 6 to 8 months old. But these others, here in the cheekbone, here in the orbital socket, and this one at the base of the skull, these are older. Different stages of healing. That means different incidents at different times." My mouth went dry. Sandra had never once mentioned breaking any bones. Not a word. "Mr. Harmon, I have to ask you directly." Dr. Mercer's voice was steady and careful. "Have you ever struck your wife?" The question hit me like a physical impact. "No." "Never?" "I would never do that. I believe you," she said, "but I'm required by law to report what I'm seeing. Before I do, I wanted to talk with you first. Can you tell me how many accidents Sandra has had since you've been together?" I started counting out loud. The wrist she sprained slipping on ice about a year ago. The fall down the stairs at a client's office in Bellevue. She'd bruised her ribs badly that time and was sore for weeks. A fall getting out of the shower that left a bruise on her shoulder. A hiking trip where she landed hard on her side. A time she bumped her head on an open cabinet door in the kitchen. I watched Dr. Mercer's expression shift with each one. "Mr. Harmon, that's at least 6 significant injuries in under 3 years." She said the pattern she was seeing could indicate a few different things. A medical condition affecting balance or bone density. Domestic violence, or, she paused before saying it, a pattern consistent with insurance fraud. The room felt like it was closing in. Sandra and I left the office in silence. In the car, she was furious, said Dr. Mercer was incompetent, that the x-rays could show anything, that she probably had some undiagnosed bone condition. Her anger was immediate and convincing. She said the dentist had practically accused her husband of abuse in front of the office manager, and that she'd be finding a new dentist. She turned toward the window and didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me almost did. But something had shifted. A door had opened that I couldn't close back up. That night, while Sandra was in the shower, I went into her home office. I had never done that before. She kept it private, and I had always respected that. I'm not sure what I was expecting to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe just enough to convince myself everything was fine. Her filing cabinet wasn't locked. I found the first folder and started reading. Then the second. By the time Sandra turned the shower off upstairs, I was sitting at her desk with my hands shaking and my phone out, photographing every page as fast as I could. 3 separate sets of hospital discharge papers I had never seen. Emergency room visits, 1 in Seattle, 2 in Bellevue, spread across the past 2 years. Each time she had gone alone, each time she had been treated for injuries she had never mentioned to me. A dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, a concussion. The dates matched evenings she had told me she was at client meetings. Weekends she had said she was at seminars in Portland. Under those papers, I found the insurance claims, not from our joint policy. From a separate personal accident policy I had no idea she had. Claims totaling just over $280,000 across 2 years. Every single claim had been paid out in full. I put everything back exactly the way I found it. Walked to the living room, sat down, picked up a book I had no intention of reading. When Sandra came downstairs in her bathrobe, she sat next to me on the couch and took my hand. "I know today was strange," she said, "but I promise you there's nothing to worry about. I'm just clumsy, Arthur. I didn't tell you about some of those falls because you've had so much on your plate with your health. I didn't want to add to your stress." Her eyes were earnest, warm, the same eyes that had made me feel seen at that charity dinner 4 years ago. I said, "I know, don't worry about it," and I waited for her to go to sleep. At almost midnight, I was still sitting in the dark living room, listening to Sandra breathe in the bedroom upstairs. I picked up my phone and called Allison. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" I told her everything, the dental appointment, what Dr. Mercer had found on the x-rays, what I'd found in Sandra's filing cabinet, the hospital records, the $280,000 in insurance claims from a policy I didn't know existed. I kept my voice low and laid it out in order, like I was walking through a project inspection. Allison was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, "Dad, those smoothies she makes you every morning, when exactly did your symptoms start?" I thought about it, around 18 months into the marriage. Give or take. "And when did the first insurance claim happen?" "Based on what you saw." I pulled up the photos on my phone and checked the dates. The first ER visit was about 20 months ago. The first claim filed roughly 19 months ago. Another silence. Then Allison said, carefully, "Dad, I need you to stop drinking those smoothies, starting tomorrow. Don't tell her. Don't make a thing of it. Just stop. And I need you to see a doctor she doesn't know, not Dr. Payton, someone completely separate." I asked if she was saying what I thought she was saying. "I'm saying you've been getting sicker while she's been quietly collecting insurance money on injuries nobody else knew about. That's all I'm saying right now. Please just do this one thing." The fear in her voice was steady and controlled, which was somehow worse than if she'd been upset. That's how Allison gets when something is serious. She goes quiet and focused. I agreed because I recognized that tone. It's the same tone I used on job sites when something structural was wrong and there wasn't time to debate it. The next morning, I poured the smoothie down the kitchen sink while Sandra's back was turned. Told her I wasn't feeling well enough to eat. She pressed the back of her hand to my forehead, said I felt fine, suggested I try a few sips. I shook my head and went to sit on the porch. I did the same thing the next morning, and the morning after that. By day 4, something shifted. The fog that had been sitting over my thinking for months started to thin out. Not gone, but different. Lighter. My stomach stopped cramping. The nausea I'd been treating as a fact of life just wasn't there. My hands still tingled some, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could hold a thought from one end of a room to the other. On day 4, while Sandra was out at what she called a client meeting, I drove to a walk-in clinic in Shoreline, well outside our usual neighborhood. I saw a Dr. Nancy Reyes and told her everything, the symptoms, how long they'd lasted, the improvement after I stopped the smoothies. I expected her to tell me it was probably stress or a dietary change. She didn't. "Mr. Harmon, I'd like to run a comprehensive toxicology screen," she said. "If someone has been introducing a substance into your system gradually over time, traces can still show up in your blood, hair, and urine even after recent exposure stops." She looked at me steadily. "If the results show what I think they might, I'll need to contact the police. Are you prepared for that?" I told her to run the test. I came home that evening to find Sandra in the kitchen making salmon with a maple glaze, my favorite. She'd set the table, poured wine, put on music. She smiled when I walked in and said I looked better than I had in weeks. I pushed food around my plate and said my stomach was still off. Her expression shifted for just a second, something between frustration and recalculation, before settling back into concern. She told me to go rest and she'd clean up. 2 nights later, I was in bed staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed with a text from Allison. Dr. Mercer had filed a report with Adult Protective Services. A forensic consultant had reviewed the x-rays. The finding, the injury pattern was consistent with self-inflicted trauma staged for insurance purposes. I got up and went downstairs. I needed to think and I couldn't do it lying next to Sandra. I was in the study with my laptop when I heard her come down the stairs. She appeared in the doorway in her robe, backlit by the hallway light. "Arthur, what are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep." She came into the room and sat in the chair across from me. "You've been acting strange since the dental appointment. You're upset with me." "Should I be?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of question is that? The kind you ask when you find hospital discharge papers in your wife's filing cabinet. 3 ER visits in 2 years, a dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, a concussion, all on nights you told me you were at client meetings." She went completely still. I watched her face, watched her calculate. Then her expression shifted into something wounded. "You went through my private files. Why didn't you tell me about any of those injuries?" "Because you've been falling apart for months, Arthur." "Memory problems? Confusion? Weakness? I've been holding this household together while you deteriorate, and I didn't want to pile on." The word deteriorate landed hard. She said it like a fact, like she'd been waiting to say it out loud. "What's in the smoothies, Sandra? Vitamins, protein powder, fruit? You've watched me make them 100 times. What's really in them?" She stood up. "You've lost your mind. I'm calling Dr. Peyton in the morning. Maybe he can refer you to someone who specializes in paranoia, because this isn't normal. Don't walk away from me." She spun back around. Her voice went cold in a way I had never heard before. "Don't tell me what to do in my own home. Your home, yes, my home, after everything I've done for you, after everything I've put up with, your health complaints, your daughter treating me like a suspect at every visit, living every day in another woman's shadow. I should have known you'd never actually let me be your wife." Her eyes filled with tears, right on cue. She was good. "If I hadn't seen those insurance documents, if I hadn't stopped the smoothies and felt my head start to clear, I would have apologized. I would have believed every word. Instead, I said, I'm moving into the guest room until I figure some things out." The tears stopped like someone turned off a faucet. "Just like that, fine. Maybe that's for the best." I lay in the guest room listening to her move through the house, heard her on the phone speaking low to someone for a long stretch, heard her in the kitchen for almost an hour around 2 a.m. I didn't sleep. When morning came and she left for what she said was an early client breakfast, I called Dr. Reyes. "Your results are back, Mr. Harmon," she said, without any preamble. "You have elevated levels of thallium in your system, not acutely toxic, but consistent with chronic, low-dose exposure over an extended period of time." A pause. "I've already contacted the Seattle Police Department. They want to speak with you immediately." 2 detectives arrived at the house within the hour. Detective Beverly Crane was in her mid-40s, direct and unhurried. Detective Rodney Torres was younger, took notes without looking up. I sat them down at the kitchen table and showed them everything, the photos I'd taken of the insurance documents, the hospital discharge papers, and the emails I'd found on our shared computer that morning before Sandra left. Emails to someone named Arnold. references to the plan and keeping the old man confused. Detective Crane read through the emails twice without saying anything. Then she asked, "Do you know who Arnold is?" "No, I've never heard her mention that name. They bagged the blender. They took the vitamin powder containers from the kitchen counter. They took my laptop and the printed photos I'd made that morning." Detective Torres found 2 more supplement containers in the cabinet above the refrigerator and bagged those too. Before they left, Detective Crane turned to me and said, "Mr. Harmon, it's not safe for you to be here when your wife returns. Is there somewhere you can go?" I called Allison. She was booked on the next flight out of Denver before I finished the sentence. Within 6 hours, I was checked into a hotel in Capitol Hill with a patrol officer stationed outside the door. Allison arrived that evening, walked straight past me, and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Then she sat down, looked at me, and said, "I'm staying until this is done." I didn't argue. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The powder in the containers wasn't a wellness supplement. Lab analysis confirmed it was laced with thallium sulfate, a toxic heavy metal once used in commercial rat poison. Nearly tasteless. Causes nerve damage, gastrointestinal distress, cognitive confusion, and numbness in the extremities. Fatal in high doses. In low repeated doses, it breaks a person down gradually, mimicking the symptoms of natural aging. According to the forensic toxicologist brought in by the department, if I had continued ingesting it for another 2 to 3 months, my organs would have begun to fail. It would have looked like natural causes. Given my documented health decline and my mother's history of Alzheimer's, nobody would have questioned it. The emails led to Arnold Renfield, Sandra's former stepson from her 3rd marriage. He was 29 years old and had been working with her for at least 3 years. Further investigation revealed that Sandra Caldwell was not her real name. Her legal name was Sandra Renfield. She had changed it 7 years ago, just before relocating to Seattle. Before that, she had been married 3 times. All 3 husbands were dead. The first 2 deaths had been ruled accidental. One a fall downstairs, one a drowning. The 3rd husband, Arnold's father, had died of what was listed as acute kidney failure. No autopsy had been performed because he had a prior history of kidney disease. Sandra had collected $1 million from his life insurance policy. 3 years after that, the staged injury scheme began. Arnold helped her set up the accidents, photograph the injuries, file the claims, and split the proceeds. Then she found me recently widowed, financially stable, a paid-off house in Eastlake, no reason to be suspicious of a woman who seemed to care about him. She had taken out a $15 million life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, forging my signature using documents I had signed legitimately, the marriage certificate, a tax form, a home equity filing. Digital manipulation software handled the rest. Detective Crane delivered all of this in the hotel room 3 days after I had left the house. Allison sat beside me holding my hand. When Crane got to the part about how long I had left, if I'd kept drinking the smoothies, Allison made a sound I never want to hear again. I couldn't speak for a full minute. "We arrested Sandra and Arnold this morning," Detective Crane said. "She's being charged with attempted murder, aggravated fraud, and identity fraud. We're also requesting the reopening of investigations into the deaths of her previous husbands. Arnold is being charged as an accessory. Sandra's trial happened 9 months later. By then, I had recovered most of my physical health. The cognitive effects took longer. I still lost words sometimes, still had moments where a thought slipped sideways before I could catch it. The doctors said some of it might be permanent, depending on total exposure duration. I sat through every day of the trial. Arnold testified against Sandra in exchange for a plea arrangement. He described in flat, clinical detail how they had researched poisons, how Sandra had been methodically increasing the thallium concentration in my smoothies over time, and how they had planned to wait several months after my death before accessing the insurance payout to avoid drawing attention. The defense tried to paint Sandra as someone with untreated mental illness who had been manipulated by Arnold. The jury didn't buy it. They saw what I had been too close to see, a calculating patient predator who had built a career out of targeting people in the most vulnerable stretches of their lives. Guilty on all counts. Sandra got 25 years. Arnold got 7. As the officers led her out, Sandra looked back at me once, no remorse, no emotion at all. Just that same flat, measuring look I had seen flash across her face the night I asked her what was in the smoothies. I sold the house in Eastlake. I couldn't walk through it anymore without seeing all the things I had missed. Allison helped me find a smaller place near Green Lake, I started seeing a therapist. I joined a support group for older adults who had been targeted by financial predators and relationship fraud. There were 7 of us the first night. Every single one felt embarrassed about being there. By the 3rd meeting, nobody did. Here's what I know now, that I wish I had known earlier. The isolation happens slowly. You don't notice your world shrinking until one person is handling all of it. Your appointments, your paperwork, your accounts, your narrative of your own health. The gaslighting works because a smart predator studies your fears first. Sandra knew about my mother's Alzheimer's before she ever introduced thallium. She built the dementia story before she needed to use it. And the people who love you will sometimes see what you can't. Allison tried to tell me at the beginning. She was careful about it because she didn't want to push me away. I was careful about dismissing it because I didn't want to admit I might be making a mistake. We were both being considerate in ways that nearly cost me my life. If your kid calls you every Sunday just to check in, take that call seriously. If something feels off, look into it. There's no shame in asking questions inside your own house. And if you find yourself feeling more confused, more dependent, more foggy than you should, don't let anyone tell you that's just aging. Get a second opinion from a doctor nobody in your house knows about. I'm 58 years old. I put in 30 years on construction sites, made it through 2 recessions, and lost Patricia to cancer. I came within a few months of being killed by a woman I trusted completely, but I'm still here. The woman who tried to take everything from me taught me the one thing I should have known all along. The most dangerous person in your life is never a stranger. It's someone who's already sitting at your table. Survival isn't just about making it out alive. It's about waking up the next morning, making your own coffee, and knowing that every ordinary day you have from here on out, nobody handed it to you. You fought for it. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more real stories every week, and drop "still here" in the comments. I read every single one.